you to get your schedules to work for you to be here today, but I want you to know that it is noted and it is appreciated by all committee members. Appearing with Minister LeBlanc will be, well, I'll let you introduce the people who are here with you, and we'll keep your opening comments to 5 minutes. For the purpose of committee members, I will remind everyone that all comments will be made through the chair, and I will remind us of the conversation we've been having in regards to interpretation and only one person speaking at a time. And if a question is posed or comment is made, that we want to provide adequate time for it to be responded. And I think I have demonstrated that I will always provide time for good, important conversations, as it is such an important topic that we are dealing with. So we will now start with Minister LeBlanc for 5 minutes. Welcome, Minister.
So, Madam Chair, thank you. Colleagues, thank you for your invitation. I'm obviously very happy to be here with my colleague Mélanie Joly, but I'm accompanied in my capacity as Minister responsible for democratic institutions by somebody that you know well, Al Sutherland, who's the Assistant Secretary to the Cabinet for the Machinery of Government. It's an impressive title, and democratic institutions. Madame la Présidente, il est essentiel.
Madam Chairperson, working diligently to preserve the integrity of our elections is essential to maintaining the legitimacy, credibility and reliability of Canada's democratic processes.
Interference in Canada's elections is obviously not acceptable. But let me be very clear. Canada's elections are free and fair, and the non-partisan national security experts who oversee threats to elections are confident in the results of these elections. As a world leader in various economic, technological, and research sectors, Canada has always been subject to foreign interference activities. C'est pourquoi, à une époque où de nombreux
That is why, at a time when many democracies have already faced foreign interference activities, it remains important for Canada to prepare for this evolving threat. And we have done so through a wide range of innovative measures to address complex threats. Canada has led the way among our international partners with the Plan to Protect Canadian Democracy, announced in early 2019. This strategy has 4 distinct areas of action.
The first part of our plan, as you know, focuses on citizen resilience through preparedness and prevention by enhancing digital media literacy. Since 2000, we have reached more than 12 million Canadians under the Digital Citizen Initiative through projects helping people recognize fraud, disinformation, and manipulation when they see it online. The second part of our plan focuses on improving our government's ability to identify threats, emerging tactics, and vulnerabilities in our systems. As part of these measures, we've worked for the first time to provide security clearance to representatives from each of Canada's major political parties to make sure they were able to protect their organizations, their candidates, and ultimately our democracy. We also created, as I've said in the House of Commons a number of times, the Critical Election Incident Public Protocol to make sure that a non-partisan panel was in place during the caretaker period, the election period, to inform Canadians quickly and effectively of any incidents that threaten Canada's ability to have a free and fair election. And we established the Security and Intelligence Threats to Elections Task Force to support the work of this important panel. En troisième lieu, en tant que défi mondial,
Third, as a global challenge, the fight against foreign interference requires international cooperation. In this regard, Canada has also been active on the world stage, leading the creation of the G7 Rapid Response Mechanism, which has provided a coordinated approach with our allies to respond to foreign threats to democracy. The fourth part of our plan combines awareness and action by increasing transparency, authenticity, and integrity on social media platforms. In May 2019, we released Canada's Declaration on Online Election Integrity. The statement was updated in 2021 and is supported by numerous platforms, including Microsoft, Facebook, Twitter, Google, TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn.
Interference and disinformation challenges are too complex and too relentless for any one actor to tackle them alone. Observers routinely commend Canada for the high levels of integrity in our federal elections. In no small part, this is a result of Canada's electoral law, including amendments passed through the Elections Modernization Act, which took into account, of course, colleagues, recommendations made by this committee in previous parliaments. The result is that our law, including our political financing regime and Elections Canada itself, is regarded as one of the most thorough in the world. Madame la Présidente, je sais que notre temps s'écoule et nous...
Madam Chair, I know our time is running short. We are continuing as a government to enhance the measures that we have put in place. We continue to do so as the threats to democracy continue to evolve, and Canada must be prepared. On that note, Madam Chair, I hand the floor back to you and thank you again. We thank you, Minister, for being here with us. Minister Joly, 5 minutes, please. Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson.
Members of the committee, it's a pleasure to be before you today. And I want to thank you for the invitation to discuss foreign interference, and in particular, thank you for examining the matter of foreign interference in Canada's federal elections. We all know the world is at a critical time. The world's power structures are shifting. Democratic systems are under threats and, in some cases, under attack. We know that Canada is not immune, particularly given the realities of our interconnected world. The reality is that we can't take anything for granted, and that includes being vigilant in protecting our own democracy. Les rapports d'ingérence étrangère chinoise.
Reports of Chinese foreign interference in Canada's 2019 general election are deeply troubling. We take these allegations very seriously, and I will speak about China in more detail in a moment. First, let me say that protecting our democracy from any form of interference is a critically important priority for the Government of Canada. We must ensure our elections are legitimate, credible and trustworthy. We will ensure there is no interference. We're taking, therefore, a whole-of-government approach to countering threats to Canada's electoral integrity, prosperity and sovereignty. My colleague, Minister LeBlanc, spoke to these a little earlier. It's a clear, simple and straightforward process. The protocol will ensure that Canadians are notified of any threats to an election after it has been called. A federal panel of national security, foreign affairs, electoral and legal experts is responsible for following that process. The protocol is part of a whole-of-government plan to protect democracy, and the plan has 4 pillars: foreign interference, building a healthy information ecosystem, and ensuring citizen and organisational preparedness. We have put in place a task force, the Security Intelligence Threats to Elections Task Force, also known as the SITE Task Force. The task force is made up of officials from CSE, CSIS and RCMP and Global Affairs. They work together to prevent covert, clandestine or criminal activities from disrupting Canada's elections. They monitor various on- and offline activities and support the Government of Canada in assessing and responding to potential threats. I'd now like to speak about disinformation campaigns led by Russia and Canada.
Target of
China.
Information in recent years, Russia has long used disinformation and propaganda to advance its objectives. This is well known, as are the Kremlin's tactics of creating polarization narratives aimed at undermining trust and social cohesion in the West. Canada continues to work with international partners to monitor and share information on the tactics used by Russia, particularly related to disinformation campaigns. In recognition of the importance of this work, this past summer, the Prime Minister announced the expansion of the Rapid Response Mechanism to include a dedicated team to focus on Russian disinformation as part of Canada's strategy in Eastern Europe and the Caucasus. China shows growing sophistication in carrying on online campaigns to influence Canadians and people worldwide. Beijing can quickly saturate social media platforms with messaging, but it is also nimble enough to micro-target Anglophone, Francophone, and Chinese-speaking audiences in Canada. China is considered by some as being best able to spread its influence online now that social media companies have curtailed Russian-aligned accounts' activities in the wake of the invasion of Ukraine. Last month, I raised the matter of alleged Chinese foreign interference with my Chinese counterpart, Wang Yi, on the margins of the G20. I said to him directly that Canada will not tolerate any form of foreign interference in Canada. And as I said recently, when launching the Canada's Indo-Pacific strategy, we will do more to tackle foreign interference and disinformation. The strategy recognizes China's growing influence globally. It states that domestically, Canada's approach to China will include strengthening the defense of Canadian infrastructure and democracy against foreign interference. That includes interference in our elections. Let me stop here for now. Madam Chair, I'll be pleased to take your questions. Merci beaucoup.
Excellent. Thank you so much. We will start with 6-minute rounds, starting with Mr. Cooper, followed by Mr. Turnbull, suivi par Madame Gaudreau, et puis Madame Blaney. Mr. Cooper, 6 minutes to you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and through you, thank you to the ministers for being here. Ministers Joly and LeBlanc, were you briefed earlier this year, or did you receive memos about interference by Beijing in the 2019 election?
Madam Chair, through you to Mr. Cooper, yes, I have received updates, as have a number of implicated ministers, from our security and intelligence officials as part of the routine responsibilities. So I have participated in some of these discussions. It's not frequent, but certainly it's something that I would be updated on by security and intelligence officials in the government.
As for foreign interference in the 2019 elections, I did not have any information to that regard. I think you've heard the Prime Minister about this, which he has no information to that regard neither, and Jody Thomas, the NSIA, which specifically before all of you stated that we have not seen money going to 11 candidates, period. So that would be my answer to you.
Thank you for that. And for you, Madam Chair, to Minister LeBlanc, you indicated that you have been briefed more than once. Can you elaborate on what you know and what you were briefed about, specifically with respect to interference in the 2019 election by Beijing?
So, Madam Chair, as the Prime Minister indicated in the House of Commons, our ability to discuss publicly the details of those national security briefings is understandably limited. That was true of predecessor governments, including the Conservative government that was in office before us. The briefings, again, the Prime Minister in his answers and question period and in various media interviews that I have seen.
My time is limited, Minister, but I'll put the question this way. Did Beijing interfere in the 2019 and 21 elections? Yes or no?
Madam Chair, I think that both Mélanie Joly and I have said that the Chinese government regularly attempts to interfere in various aspects of Canadian society. Elections would not be excluded from some of their efforts to interfere. The good news is we have a robust security apparatus that follows these threats, that intervenes. And for me, the most reassuring news is that the experts that are empowered to do this work have confirmed that none of these attempts to interfere have constituted in any way something that would have had an adverse effect on the election results and the election outcomes.
Can I add to that? I think that you've heard Jody Thomas about this. You heard the Prime Minister. I think maybe my Deputy Minister, David Morrison, could add to that.
I'll happily add to it. Before I was Deputy Minister, I was acting National Security Advisor all through the most recent election. And I was also acting National Security Advisor in the period after the 2019 election. And what I would say is that there was, as has already been said, there is a kind of baseline level of foreign interference or attempted foreign interference at all times that we need to be vigilant on. But my experience as National Security Advisor in those key periods was that there was no spike in foreign interference that I'm aware of in either the 2019 election or the 2021 election.
In the production that we received from the PCO, there is a report entitled Daily Foreign Intelligence Brief of February 21st, 2020, and it speaks to a subtle but effective interference network in which it says that investigations into activities linked to the Canadian federal election in 2019 reveal an active foreign interference network. Can you speak to that foreign interference network? What that is referencing?
So, Madam Chair, I am not familiar with that specific report, but I certainly take on face value what our colleague has quoted. And I think it just confirms what the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs has just said, that there is, at various times, an active effort, not only from that country, as Melanie Joly just said, there are other actors that are also involved in this space. But our government has taken the necessary steps to protect democratic institutions, and we
So
believe
are you aware of an
that
active
has been
foreign interference
successful.
network in the 2019 election by Beijing?
I think, as I said in my comments,
Tough to believe you wouldn't be.
Point of order.
So this is what's
Through
not
you,
fun, because
Madam Chair.
all that happens is we end up having points of orders, we take away time, which means there's less time for questions. So wherever there is an action, there is a reaction. So I suggest, as per my opening comments, one person speaks at a time. And Mr. Cooper, as I've demonstrated in the past, if you have a good line of questions, I'll give you a bit of time. But I think you want to ask good questions, make comments, and I think we've invited these ministers to be here because they have insights to share. So we can let him respond. Is that okay? Excellent. The Minister.
So, Madam Chair, through you, as we've said consistently, and the Prime Minister has repeated, we are aware of, I think Mr. Morrison said, a base load of attempts from a number of foreign actors to interfere not only in the electoral context, but in other economic contexts as well. So we're not naive about the threat that this represents. And the good news, Madam Chair, is our government has taken robust and unique steps that didn't exist when previous governments were in office to combat exactly this legitimate concern of Mr. Cooper's that's shared by the government.
Mr. Cooper, final question?
Well, I just note it was specifically an active foreign interference network as it pertains to the CCP.
Well, you've asked me the question regarding any form of information I would have regarding the 2019 election or 2021 election even. And I can confirm you that I have no information regarding this particular issue. And of course, my comment regarding foreign interference in general is that we have a principled approach. We
Thank
don't
you.
tolerate it, period.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. Turnbull, 6 minutes to you.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks to our ministers and their officials for being here today with us on this important topic, which I think we all take with a great degree of, we approach it with a great degree of concern and a sense of duty and responsibility. Minister LeBlanc, maybe I'll start with you with a few quick questions. Did foreign election interference start becoming a concern in 2019?
Madam Chair, Mr. Turnbull raises a question. Our government took positive steps after assuming office, as we've indicated, with respect to the 2019 general election. But I would, and I don't have information that exists for security briefings that would have covered previous periods, but it would be naive to think that this foreign interference suddenly started after 2015. The tactics, as colleagues have said, are more sophisticated. Some people, I think, my colleague, Madame Joly, indicated they get emboldened, some actors, but I don't think this is a new phenomenon. Maybe Melanie wants to add something.
I think the difference over the years in terms of foreign interference is actually the question of disinformation online. And what happened over the last year is definitely the fact that we all use social media, and all our citizens are on social media. So how we tackle the issue of disinformation online is extremely important for our democracy. But it is an issue that we are not facing alone. We are facing this issue as our allies and our partners are facing that same issue. Definitely the Americans, definitely Europeans, other democracies in the world. So bearing that in mind, what we decided to do recently is, on the margin of the General Assembly of the UN, is to launch a first disinformation online work to have a declaration on this issue along with the Netherlands. And we hope that we can come up with this new declaration, which would be creating the foundation for international law when it comes to disinformation.
Thank you for that. And Minister LeBlanc, back to you. I'm wondering whether we've heard assertions from time to time in the House and in this committee that somehow our government has neglected to implement measures to prevent against foreign election interference, and I think that's contrary to the truth as far as I understand. Do you have any documentation or perhaps an overview or an outline of the progress that we've made since 2015?
So, Madam Chair, Mr. Turnbull's question is a very good one. And I have before me something that Privy Council Office has prepared. It's measures to combat foreign interference in elections. It's a 10-year review. It summarizes what I think are many of the innovative and effective actions our government has taken starting in the 2016-17 period. It also shows what existed before 2016, where, as we've said, the threats were not somehow not present. But the establishment of the rapid response mechanism, which came out of the G7 summit, for example, in Charlevoix, some of the work that's done around the Paris call for trust and security in cyberspace, obviously the Protecting Democracy Plan of 2019, which I referred to earlier, around citizen preparedness, setting up the panel. What I would propose, if it's okay, Madam Chair, I'm happy. I just asked Mr. Sutherland, I'd be happy to make available to the committee this particular chart. Make sure, obviously, qu'on l'a dans les deux langues officielles.
That we have it in both official languages.
Chair, happily, I think it sets out a rather compelling answer to your very good question.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. I think if that could be tabled with the committee, that would be very helpful. We got a package of documents as well, Minister LeBlanc, that from NSIA. It's the branch package. And on page 9, and I want to read this into the record because I think it's pretty important, it says, and it's in regards to political parties, it says, in accordance with the protocol, cleared members of the political parties also received routine threat updates. We received positive feedback by the parties on this experience, most notably from the Conservative Party of Canada. It actually says CPC. So what's interesting about this is I keep hearing this narrative coming from the official opposition that somehow this is a revelation to them that at this moment in time they're concerned about election interference, when in fact it seems as though they've been briefed on these credible threats from time to time quite regularly. Could you maybe, either of the ministers, speak to that and how regular that happens?
Sure. Very briefly, Madam Chair, I can speak to exactly what Mr. Turnbull said. We thought it was important for major political parties to have access, to be security cleared and have access to this information. That is about protecting our democracy and ensuring that important political institutions like the Conservative Party of Canada in our democracy have access to this information and can take the necessary steps to protect their own infrastructure in the political space. I think it's also important the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, which has members obviously of this House and the other place, was also briefed by intelligence officials, and we think it's important that they too be kept up to date as part of ensuring that everybody has a line of sight on the very robust measures, Mr. Turnbull, that you referred to, that our government is taking. But maybe Melanie has a brief.
Well, I think all political parties last elections were briefed on this issue. Maybe David Morrison, my DM.
I'm going to have, sorry,
Okay.
when you hear the beep, 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 means
Yeah,
time
of
runs
course.
out.
Oh, I
Really
didn't hear
awkward
it.
for me to
Okay,
have to
thank
do this. I would just appreciate that we would keep things moving. Madame Goudreau, 6 minutes.
6 minutes. The floor is yours. Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. Thank you to our witnesses. It's important to be able to shed light on these issues. Our television viewers are particularly concerned about the issue of disinformation, cyber attacks, and so on and so forth. The documents that we received from the Privy Council Office from 2019 provide a number of summaries that I'd like explanations about. It states that in 2019, an expert task force which provided daily oversight had observed no activity that would reach the threshold. And I'd like to focus in on this, a threshold that would require a public announcement regarding or anything that would endanger Canada's capabilities. What is the requirement or the threshold for a public announcement, please? Madam Chairperson, if I could just respond, and I know that Melanie will want to provide input. Now, Ms. Goudreau has honed in on an important issue here. Those threat actors that attempt to interfere during the election period, well, the expert panel chaired by the clerk of the Privy Council, deputy ministers for foreign affairs and so on and so forth, other senior officials, enjoy certain discretion when it comes to notifying Canadians in the public sphere. If they alone deem that that interference meets a certain threshold where it would be in the public interest to make such an announcement. Now, in an election campaign, it's not a minister from an outgoing government that would make that kind of public statement typically. Therefore, we have conferred deliberately this responsibility on those experts. And the reliability of the intelligence and information is determined, the impact that it might have, the bearing on certain ridings, is it of national scope, regional scope? They assess these factors at arm's length of the government and determine whether or not Canadians should be notified. And the good news is that in the past 2 elections, this didn't occur. Melanie, would you like to add to that? Yes, thank you very much, Ms. Goudreau. We all care about protecting Canada's democracy, and it's important, therefore, that this system be implemented. When there's an election, it's no longer the cabinet or the government that plays that role. There is an arm's length body that ensures a smooth transition. Now, at the time when the process was initially put in place, it was due to concern about online disinformation, and that's why I responded to my colleague earlier in that manner. And I outlined the kinds of disinformation campaigns that might influence Canadians' vote. As for the threshold itself, it's left to the discretion of the public service and senior officials who will take well-informed decisions on the basis of information from security and intelligence organisations and any other information at their disposal and that is publicly available. Would you like to add anything, Minister? Oh, yes, indeed. As I've said previously, I was a member of the panel in the 2020-2021 election, but not the 2019 election. and we were lucky in some ways.
We didn't see a spike, so the issue of thresholds didn't really come into play. We had been certainly briefed and we had done scenario playing, but in both elections, I think the panel functioned as designed and didn't have to confront the circumstances of a threshold.
Reste une minute, Madame la Présidente.
I believe I have a minute left, Madam Chair, so I'll be quick then. And as far as that task force is concerned, we were provided a summary of lessons learned. Of course, we have the privilege of being able to vote on these matters. Now, there's a lot of talk about transparency and education and awareness building. Since 2019, Madam Chairperson, there's been no spike flagged. But what are the lessons? What are the recommendations? It's crazy what's happening in terms of disinformation and cyber attacks. I think I have 30 seconds left. Well, from a foreign affairs standpoint, and perhaps my colleague can chime in, this is a major concern of the G7. And that's why we put in place the Rapid Response Mechanism, the RRM, which is being used by our allies and other G7 nations. And they can determine whether there are any trends in terms of online disinformation. I think the whole matter of online disinformation is a new contemporary problem that must be broached, and that's why we're trying to demonstrate leadership.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam Chairperson, if I may tack on to what Melanie just said, you're entirely right, in fact, Ms. Goudreau. Lessons must be learned. These are new experiences for the federal government's national security apparatus, and that's why in the wake of the 2019 election, I called on Jim Judd. There needed to be an arm's length specialist assessment, and I chose a former minister, Jim Judd, who reported to both me and the Prime Minister that we shared with the Parliamentary Committee on National Security, and they released recommendations as far as national security is concerned. Now, we're going to engage in the same exercise in 2022. Maurice Berg has been mandated to do this work, and I will be meeting with him on Thursday.
Madame Blaney, 6 minutes.
Well, thank you, Chair, and I thank all the witnesses for being here today. You know, one of the things that's very concerning about this story about the 11 candidates is the fact that it has created a great deal of distrust across Canada in our systems. And that can never be underestimated. And I think creating a sense of assurance that the systems do work is very important. And I would like to see a little bit more of that, because people see these things and they, of course, have a reaction. So could you just explain what the rationale is for not releasing the names of the individuals who were targeted by foreign interference?
So first and foremost, thank you, Rachel, for your question. I think it's really important that we all agree that this should not be a question that is politicized, because at the end of the day, like you mentioned, it's about the trust of Canadians in our institutions and in democracies. As I mentioned, we don't have information about these 11 candidates. The Prime Minister has mentioned it. His national security advisor, I, the Foreign Minister, don't have any information about this. So, of course, we take very seriously this media story, but at the same time, I'm giving you under oath the information I have, which is I don't have any form of information on this.
So in terms of process, were the candidates aware that they were targeted? Do you know that?
So, Madam Chair, perhaps, and if Al Sutherland would like to add something, because it's an important question. So I share, Melanie said it very well, I share Madame Blaney's view that trust and public confidence is essential. This is the corrosive, these state actors, these malevolent actors seek exactly to undermine that trust.
Exactly.
So I think your question is à point, is very appropriate. That's why, in as much as possible, the actions of the government, and more particularly the national security agencies that are responsible for ensuring that the democratic processes are free and fair, they need to be able to assure Canadians that that's the case, as did Madame Thomas, the National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister, and a number of other officials. Like Madame Joly, I don't have this supposed list of 11 candidates. I have seen that in the media. In my discussions with security officials, people didn't produce lists of these names. But whether individual candidates that may post facto have been the subject of an attempt, I don't know how or if they're informed of that, but maybe Al Sutherland or somebody else has information.
So I don't have a list of the 11 either. What I can say is that as part of the 2019 and 2021 elections, we did engage with primarily campaign chairs and chief information officers for the major parties. I have to say I was very pleased with the level of engagement that we had with the parties. It was clear that partisanship was left at the door, and that we had a seriousness of intent that I think was admirable. The sorts of meetings that we had were used to raise both the issues around technology, because a lot of this is cyber-enabled. So for each of the parties laying out kind of issues around technology requirements and kind of the weaknesses and the simple things that you've also heard as part of your briefings with CFC, two-factor authentication and those sorts of things. And then there were also specific briefings by the RCMP, by CSIS, by CSE, laying out kind of the state of issues. Like I would say, this was an experiment in 2019. We did it again in 2021. And just to say, it exceeded our expectations because of the seriousness with which each of the parties took it. And it was a very, I think, helpful part of the protecting election protocol. It meant that we had created, because everyone was security cleared so we could give secret briefings, it created an information link so that if parties did have issues, they could come to us and raise them with us, one-on-one, as well as in a group setting.
So thank you for that. So I guess my next question is specifically around that consultation with the parties, and I've read about it in some of the information. And I'm just wondering if a candidate of a particular party was targeted specifically. I know you can't give details, but what was the process of letting the parties know? Was it something that you talked to individually with parties if their particular candidate was identified? Or was it something that was shared with all parties, not giving maybe the detailed facts, but were they alerted to that?
So I think your question has a hypothetical aspect to it. So let me take it as a hypothetical. If it related to a specific party, it's a discussion that would be had with the party. They could, of course, raise it in forum at the meetings, but they're not required to. If they had an issue, they could come to us. If we had an issue the other way, we could come to them.
So if I can, Madam Chair, I want to make sure I understand Al's answer because it's important. I think the mechanism, and your question, Madame Blaney, is I think very appropriate. The mechanism would properly be this group that was established where Al Sutherland and his colleagues were active participants with designated representatives of the parties. If their particular candidate had a concern about a particular circumstance, it would presumably in a campaign structure be raised with the appropriate campaign officials who would then have access to Mr. Sutherland and other experts in that context. And I suppose, Al, the same way there would be a two-way process by which you have security cleared designated representatives of all these political parties with whom you and your colleagues could talk to should you see a particular incident that required their awareness?
That's correct.
Excellent. Thank you. We will now continue with Monsieur Berthold. 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, and thank you, Ministers, for being with us here today. Minister LeBlanc, you stated at the outset that some information was of public interest in terms of national security, and you couldn't tell us everything that you've become aware of during your briefings. Is that correct?
C'est une tradition qui...
That's a convention that goes back to a number of governments, so you won't be surprised that you're entirely right with what you have just surmised. Have you been informed of any incident of foreign interference, like by the Chinese regime in our previous elections during the course of these briefings?
Madame la Présidente, comme...
Madam Chairperson, as I responded to Mr. Berthold's colleagues in English, the discussions of a general nature, the intelligence services' ways of dealing with certain foreign interferers. But as far as specific cases, you'll understand that your predecessors in the Harper government didn't disclose this publicly because it was irresponsible too, but I can assure you that the information that the Prime Minister transmitted to the House of Commons was completely correct. So what you're saying is you can't give us any more information. Minister Joly, were you informed personally of specific incidents in the 2019 or 2021 elections? No, I was not. As Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister Joly, you recently released an Indo-Pacific strategy that I read. Congratulations on reading that. Now, there is something that struck me. Canada is going to continue to strengthen the infrastructure of national security in Canada, so I assume that you were briefed about the foreign interference by the Chinese regime when it came to implementing and designing that strategy. Response. We know, generally speaking, that there are attempts of foreign interference, but were you specifically informed? Were there any briefings? If I could just conclude my response. Yes, I do receive briefings on attempts of foreign interference by certain foreign actors, and I know full well that when these issues are raised, I work hand in hand with my colleague, Minister Mendicino. Our national security agencies have a job to do when this occurs. Now, my job as Minister of Foreign Affairs is to raise any issues regarding specific foreign states and communicate to them that any foreign interference is completely unacceptable, and that's what I did with my counterpart Wan Li at the G20 at its most recent meetings. Now, when it comes to elections specifically speaking, as I said previously, I have no information about the 2019-2021 elections. Madam Chairperson, I'm sorry, but well, I'm going to ask witnesses, as I have of members of this committee, if you could just keep your answers and questions quite short. Minister LeBlanc and Mr. Berthold, the floor is yours. Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'd like to follow what you've just said. And Minister LeBlanc, how is it that we didn't receive any briefing note from your department about foreign interference in our elections? The committee specifically requested any information about foreign interference. How is it that there's no document from the Department of Foreign Affairs on foreign interference, Minister Joly? On the issue of foreign interference in our elections, as I said, I have no information. However, as I said earlier in this committee hearing, the issue of online disinformation, which is a form of foreign interference in and of itself, we have borne witness to a number of attempts on the part of countries such as Russia and China of launching online disinformation campaigns which have an impact on our democracy. So we have to do more to address this, and we also have the rapid response mechanism in order to achieve this. Minister, you are the Minister of Foreign Affairs. You developed an Indo-Pacific strategy, and in your department, you have produced no briefing notes on foreign interference from the Peking regime in our democratic system. Because, and if I rely on the documents that were sent through to PROC, our committee, we have received no information whatsoever from the Department of Foreign Affairs. Can I respond to that first, Madam Chair? It's not a question, it's an assertion, Madam Chairperson. Could I have a little extra time for a final question? Yes, if you'd like to finish what you had to say. Well, there's a lot of talk about the 2019 and 2021 elections, but what about the ramifications thereafter? In the 2019 and 2021 reports, there are questions about what occurred that have been raised, and unfortunately, we haven't got the proper responses that we sought. Sometimes things are discovered after the fact, and so what I want to know is, in the wake of the 2019 and 2021 elections, what have you learned about this clandestine network of 19 candidates that were financed? A very quick response, please, Minister. Well, I think that my colleague has already gotten answers to these questions. And our response is that we have no information about the 11 candidates in question. I can't be clearer on that. As far as the Indo-Pacific strategy is concerned, I'm glad that you read it, because at the tail end of the strategy, if you look at the appendix, there is $150 million earmarked to support our security intelligence agencies to manage the issue of foreign interference. Thank you very much. Mr. Berthold.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I hope so.
Really, I'm sorry.
I hope
Apologize.
so.
Yeah.
Mrs. Sahota, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just going off of where we've left off, the fact that I keep hearing from Minister Joly and Minister LeBlanc that you have no information as to money going to these candidates. In the recent Defense Committee meeting that has been referenced here today, we had Ms. Thomas, who is the Prime Minister's National Security Advisor, as you know, state that she has not seen money going to 11 candidates, period. Would you agree with that statement? Is that your assessment, or has that been conveyed to you in your briefings as well?
Like I said, I have no information about the 2019 election nor 2021 regarding foreign interference, and therefore I can only relate to Jody Thomas' statement and the Prime Minister's statement. Thank you.
And if I can, Madame Sahota, so the information I've received both from Privy Council Office and security agencies is exactly consistent with what Jody Thomas shared at the other committee as well.
My next question about the briefings regarding the briefings in which all parties take part, different leaders have taken part, and I imagine the democratic reforms minister is informed about. You've said that there's a lot of cooperation, Mr. Sutherland, in those meetings. Within those meetings, can you explain as to what issues have come up and how often these meetings have been happening? Like, I assume that they haven't just been happening now post 2019 and 2021 elections, because we've been talking about this baseline of interference that we've been aware of as a country for some time now. So can you elaborate as to how long we've been having these types of briefings and where the discussions have evolved to?
So, Madam Chair, if you'll allow, I know Mr. Sutherland, who has direct personal knowledge, having participated in those discussions with political parties, can answer Madame Sahota's question. But I also think that Deputy Minister Morrison, also having been a member of the panel, as he indicated in a previous election, can also provide insight that we're obviously not participating, Melanie and I, in those particular fora. So perhaps Mr. Sutherland and Mr. Morrison could provide very precise answers to a very good question.
So perhaps I'll start. For the briefings of the political parties, so the committee, if I can call it that, occurs during the election time period. So they would have, could be weekly, once every 2 weeks during the election time period. The briefings are intended to provide information on security steps that parties should take, and also anything we're seeing in the more of the national security space. So that's why you'd have briefings from CSE. You had the RRM came forward and provided a briefing of just kind of what was, the ambient level of disinformation, just providing a sense of here's what we're seeing, here's what we're not seeing. Parties were invited to ask questions. They were also invited, if they had something that was perhaps sensitive to them, that they could come one-on-one and we could have a follow-up.
Who are the
discussion.
parties' representatives that
So-
meet in these meetings?
I'm sorry, I don't have the names right now, but typically it was the campaign chair as well as a CIO. So, like for the Conservatives, it was Waleed Solomon, and I think it was Anne McGrath. They both were participants. I'm sorry, it wasn't the campaign chair for the Liberals, so I don't recall who it was.
I have very little to add. Al's group provides the support function. I was one of the briefers. I think we did it once, kind of mid-campaign, and what we were able to convey is a version of the answer I've already given. Foreign interference is an ongoing concern, but we hadn't seen any perceptible spike up to the point of the briefing, and that was the case for the rest of the 2021 election.
Briefings that would have taken place after the 2015 election, just like the ones that we're talking about after the 2019 and 2021, would that have included former Prime Minister Harper, Prime Minister Trudeau, former Minister Pierre Poilievre at the time he was Democratic Reform Minister?
Well, I'm not the Democratic Institution Minister, but I can answer for him if he wants to. I'm teasing him. But basically my answer is there was no process before. We put into place the first process to deal with this issue because we had real concerns as other democracies in the world had faced issues of foreign interference.
Yeah, so Madam Chair, the answer to the question is that after the 2015 election, none of these institutional elements had been put in place by the previous Conservative government. So the follow-up, the review, the effort to strengthen, because we've also evolved our own measures from 2019 to 2021, in large part based on the report by, again, an expert like Jim Judd.
Thank you.
Those things have been strengthened, but that didn't exist before. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madame Goudreau, 2 minutes et demie pour vous.
2.5 minutes, Ms. Goudreau. Thank you, Madam Chairperson. There's one thing we're sure of, and that is that we all agree that anything to do with espionage and foreign interference amounts to a serious threat. Now, I have the text from the National Security Outlook in 2019, and in the summary, it talks about threats to Canadian democracy. And it's been clearly stipulated that Canada is an attractive target given its position, and that there are being efforts made to interfere in our elections, and the objectives of these actions are the following. And there are 4 prongs to this attempt to create doubt as to the integrity of the election process. Now, my constituents have asked me, how is it that in question period and elsewhere you've had so many opportunities to get information, and yet parliamentarians themselves are not aware of what has occurred and what may occur? So help us to get a better handle on this. How do we restore our confidence in Canadian democracy? Is it normal that parliamentarians, of course I'll never be minister, in the Bloc Québécois we don't have federal ministers, of course, but when it comes to this context, is it normal that we wouldn't be informed? Is it normal that we would spend so many weeks trying to get our hands on this information? And this is eroding trust in our democracy, isn't it? If I may, Madam Chair, and thank you very much for the question, Ms. Goudreau is right, entirely right. And we share the Bloc's concern and that of other parliamentarians when it comes to restoring the confidence and trust of Canadians. It's so invaluable. And without that trust in the integrity and transparency of the electoral process, where would we be at? And we've seen this in neighbouring countries, the effects of a lack of confidence on the part of the public when that public confidence is undermined, even in terms of counting ballots. There are clear and worrying examples not far from where we find ourselves here today, and that required action on the part of the Canadian government. Now, one thing that's important here, and I know we're running out of time, the decision to call on the parliamentary committee that is looking into national security issues. It's presided over by our colleague, Mr. McGuinty. Share that information on a highly confidential basis. They are able to ask follow-up questions. They have very transparent channels of communication, and that body can reassure Canadians, but at the same time protect our national interests. Ms. Blaney.
Well, thank you, Chair. And I want to come back because I am really fascinated by the process. And I think that process being clearer to Canadians will help us trust these systems and also be critical where we need to. So I guess in terms of process, what I'm trying to understand is when interference is identified, are there any actions taken against those who have done the interference? Is it referred on to law enforcement? And in that context as well, are there any legislative gaps that prevent action that need to be fixed? And I guess what I want to say in that last part of the question is we're hearing clearly what the ministers don't know and what the department doesn't know. But what I don't understand is what you do know and how you look at what is happening to make sure that legislatively and in terms of all of our processes, those things are strengthened as we deal with this increase of foreign interference.
Well, so I just want to make sure, Rachel, I understand well your question. For elections or foreign interference in general?
Foreign interference in elections.
In elections. So, do you want to take it?
So, again, and maybe Mr. Sutherland wants to add something, but Madam Chair, Madame Blaney's question, I think, highlights certainly a concern that all of us share. This is a new and evolving space for open democracies like Canada's. The intelligence reports that some colleagues have read properly identify Canada as a target for the precise reasons that Madame Gaudreau and others raised. It contributes to a lack of confidence and a lack of faith in these institutions, which are fundamental to the good governance of any modern democracy. So that's why we have a high level of concern about all of these allegations. That's why we have taken what we think are a series of responsible, appropriate steps. We're always looking to strengthen, renew these measures. We evolved them from 2019 to 2021. None of these measures existed previously. This committee, I know, will produce a report or suggestions for the government that will inform further actions. Madame Joly properly identified international work we're doing with partners in the G7. Her department received additional funding in previous budgets so that we can have exactly that kind of capacity to learn best practices from other partner democracies.
Mrs. Blaney, do you want a quick word in?
One of the parts that wasn't answered is if there is foreign interference and it's identified, are the people who did it, are they charged, and who takes that on?
Yeah, so it's important to differentiate between just the ambient level. I think both ministers have discussed it about there's always a base level of foreign interference. And if we were to react to every single one as a government during an election time period, you would conclude that, in fact, you didn't have a legitimate election. And it would be wrong. It would be an incorrect impression. So what is set out in the Cabinet Directive, I think, is important, which is that there's a threshold, that it has to be hit a level of impact or potential impact. And in that case, we have a mechanism in place. It's a critical election incident public protocol panel, an acronym only a bureaucrat could come up with. And the panel of 5 is charged that if something were to exceed a certain level of impact, they would be empowered to step forward and explain to Canadians what's happened and what they can do to avoid the consequences of it. The fact that the panel has not stepped forward either in the 2019 or 2021 election should give Canadians comfort that, in fact, despite this ambient level, and I'd say, as David has, that it's low-level interference, that our elections are legitimate and proper, and there
Thank
isn't.
you.
Okay, my apologies.
I know it's hard to get in quick answers, but I appreciate the attempts. Mr. Cooper, so we've gone over time. Really grateful to both ministers and their teams for making this possible. And just to finish out the round, we're going to do a quick 2 minutes with Mr. Cooper, followed by a quick 2 minutes to Mr. Fergus. Mr. Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Minister LeBlanc, through you, keeps hiding behind national security, even though the advice of CSIS is that when it comes to foreign interference, the policy of the government be grounded in transparency and sunlight in order to expose that interference, and that such interference should be brought to the attention of the public. That is the advice that CSIS has offered the government. We haven't seen anything but transparency in the way of answers to some very straightforward questions here today. But going back to Minister Joly, through you, Madam Chair, saying that she has no information, no knowledge of interference by Beijing in the 2019 or 21 election. We have a foreign intelligence briefing document, February 21st, 2020, that doesn't make an allegation but provides an assessment of an effective interference network with respect to investigations into activities linked to the Canadian federal election in 2019, reveal an active foreign interference network by Beijing. We know in the 21 election, the minister talks about the rapid response mechanism. Analysis from the rapid response mechanism revealed that there was interference by Beijing on social media platforms. So in the face of all of that, how can the minister claim that she doesn't know, but she has no knowledge? It's simply not credible.
So I think, Michael, there's something that should be made clear to all of us. We have a shared interest in tackling foreign interference. No single person nor party benefits from any form of foreign interference, because obviously we want to make sure that our democracy works, that the will of the Canadian people is respected in every form of democratic process. Now, when it comes to foreign interference, we have national security agencies that can investigate, and afterwards, as a country, based on the rule of law, that there can be prosecution. And our job is to make sure that that work is being done, and that's why I will do so, working with the Minister of Public Safety, to make sure also that he has the right resources, that the RCMP can do anything linked to any form of foreign actors trying to influence negatively our democratic process. And at the end of the day, when it comes to disinformation online, I think this is something that I would like to be working with all of you, because this is a very important issue that all democracies in the world need to tackle. Thank you.
Mr. Cooper, quickly.
Try one more question, see if we can get an answer to a question. CSIS documents reveal that politicians and riding associations were targeted by foreign interference. What are the names of those politicians and riding associations?
Madam Chair, this question's been answered on multiple occasions. Just because Mr. Cooper wants to participate in some theatrics that are not responsible for Canadian democracy doesn't mean he's going to get an answer that doesn't exist.
Excellent. And we don't want answers that don't exist. We are trying to actually deal with a very serious issue here. So I actually appreciate that exchange. Mr. Fergus, your 2 minutes have just turned into 3 minutes and 10 seconds. Like magic. I know. If we can just do ourselves a solid and just keep the questions and comments short. The run-on sentences just run on long, and it's, yeah, I know.
It'll be the first
Santa's
time, Madam Chair,
watching.
it's ever happened in Parliament.
I
There've been
bet
run-on sentences.
breaking news,
I've
that will
never seen that.
probably
I've never
be the
seen that myself.
headline. Mr. Fergus, go ahead.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente, puis j'aimerais remercier.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. And I'd like to thank the ministers in attendance here today, as well as the senior officials that have accompanied them. My first question, Minister LeBlanc, I was a tad not shocked but surprised when you said that you are the minister responsible for democratic processes. And that's part of your mandate letter as Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs. You did say that prior to 2015, before this government came into power, there was no robust system to conduct inquiries about potential foreign interference in our election process. Is that true? Is that true that there was no process in place? Response, Madam Chair, Mr. Fergus, unfortunately, you are right. Before the election of 2015, the former Conservative government, there was no transparency mechanism that's existed since we were elected into government. Now, the protocol overseen by senior officials, those who are responsible for national security, have a solemn obligation to inform the public in circumstances where a certain threshold has been reached of interference that threatens Canadian democracy. All of this is transparent in its nature and understood by Canadians, by political parties that take part in briefings. There was no such apparatus before our government was elected into power in 2015. I can't speak for the Harper government. Of course, they are out in arms about, or they're very concerned about these allegations of interference. But when they have an opportunity to put measures in place, they were asleep at the switch. Well, I'll just take advantage of my remaining time to ask a short question of Mr. Sutherland or Mr. Morrison. Short of the process, there must have been threats. There must have been incidents of foreign interference in our political system. That just didn't simply come about in 2015. Am I right in asserting that? How is it that there was no process in place in the Canadian Public Service? 15 seconds. As my colleague, Minister LeBlanc, said, it is completely unacceptable that there was no process put in place earlier to guard against foreign interference in our elections. We know that there has been potential foreign interference for years and that we must always be on guard and vigilant. Also for leadership campaigns.
Minister Joly and Mr. LeBlanc and all officials, thank you so much for your time coming here. Mr. LeBlanc, you've been here a few times, and I really do want to shout out your team for responding so quickly and making sure that you get to come to your favorite committee, that is PROC. And with that, I wish you both the best of the season, Merry Christmas, and all that good stuff, and we look forward to seeing you again next year. And to all committee members as well, reach back out in 2023. Until then, I wish you the best, and I hope you keep well and safe. No meeting on Thursday because we've been so productive and effective. Take care. Thank you to all support teams and all that stuff too. Bye for now.